Hey everybody out there in Twitch TV land. Hopefully this is my final test for verifying that my fiber internet is working perfectly. And that I am now able to stream in glorious 1080p. Since now that I have an actual upload speed that doesn't suck. Woohoo! Don't mind me. I always get my food served by a clown. You know, the laugh's on you. Anyways, I just wanted to get on here, maybe chit-chat a little bit with everyone out there in YouTube, Facebook, Twitch TV land. After I did a bunch of analysis earlier today, I went ahead and just for those of you who are just tuning in, a few hours ago, I did a test stream in which I was verifying my new high-speed internet, in which I'm able to upload at very, very high speed, and testing my 4K camera, which is, of course, downsampling to 1080p, and also just checking all of my setups, making sure it's all working. And I did 2 streams, and I went ahead and downloaded the videos, analyzed them, verified exactly where the issues were, what they weren't, and went back into my software here, made little tweaks, cast a couple of spells, and hopefully this is the end result of 1080p glorious resolution. Now, of course, granted, as soon as I'm done with this transmission here, I will be once again downloading the video, verifying that it is indeed the quality that I was hoping I'm getting. But, right now it looks like we got ourselves a customer. Tin Kelp is asking, oh, howdy. Ooh, new internet. What do you have now? The stream is stable so far. Good, good, good. As I've stated in my last stream, what had happened was that I was originally using a cable internet line in which I had a 1 gigabit download, but it was pathetic uploads. I worked with my cable provider numerous times, and I even had technicians out here at least twice trying to diagnose why my cable upload speed was so bad. After the last time, I then noticed a correlation that the speeds on the upload was really, really bad, whereas the download was never affected. I went ahead and did a lot of research on the issues of electromagnetic harmonics based on temperature on copper wire. And it turned out that the actual frequencies that are affected by cold temperatures happened to coincide with the uplink band that they were using sending out to my ISP. I alerted to this, and of course, finally I got a technician that says, oh yeah, we've known about that. What we really do is we just either bury the cables, which in my case they were buried, but unfortunately, the cable I had went out from under the ground up about at least 15 feet outside of the house before it actually went in, and that was enough distance with the temperature that it caused the interference on cold days. So it's like, ugh. So I said, fine, hook me up with fiber. After a long time of back and forth, it became very apparent that my ISP was just not interested. Even when I said, look, I'll pay to have the cable laid, nope, they didn't care. So, of course, I started calling around, and it didn't take very long for one of the ISPs out here in this area, which I can now say is AT&T, strangely it is, who was like, you want us to come over to your house and lay down some fiber? It's going to cost you. And I said, how much? And they said, this much. And as soon as I woke up from the ground, I then said, you know what? Gimme. So now I have a 1 gigabit up and down dedicated line, which as far as I know, ever since it became live, and I've done a lot of tests and reconfigured everything in this house to it, it's been like, okay, yes, I sold my soul to get this cable, this internet connection, worth it. So as a result, I can now start doing my streaming and not worry about bandwidth issues and stuff, because I'm not even on a party line. This is a dedicated line going direct 2 hops to a main trunk. So that therefore, I mean, literally, hop 1 is from my computer to the router, which is sitting back there, which now has a cat on it, to the next hop is from that fiber line, which is a literal jump to one of the main trunks, which just so happened to be not that far from here. And then it's on the main internet backbone on 100 gigabit line, or more like, it's more like 400 gigabits, but it's actually a chunk of fibers, and like no one fiber is actually going at 400 gig. But when you take all the fibers together, combine them, it's around 400 gig. And then at that point, it goes to who knows where in the planet. And, let's just say that you've heard of low ping bastards. I'm a low ping bitch. So, websites and stuff, they're virtually instantaneous now, and it's like, holy heck. I mean, the only websites that are slow now for me are ones which are obviously hosted on people's homes, or low-cost ISPs in which there's bandwidth issues. But if it's any of the major trunks, like, say, Amazon, Facebook, Google, etc., they just load like that, as if it's on a local hard drive. But the real thing here is the fact that now I'm able to get onto my favorite Twitch channels and so forth. Corpus C asks, care to mention how much that one-time fee cost you? 5 digits, let's put it this way. Because here's the problem. Where I live, they did not wire up this area for fiber, despite the fact that this neighborhood is quite affluent, actually. Because when Janelle built this house 20 years ago, it was considered, because that's when she worked at IDS, so she had the money to build this house in a really nice neighborhood, but it was out in the boondocks at the time. So therefore, the service providers never, Tin Kelp says 5 digits with or without the decimal. Without. There is no decimal point. So as a result, when they started laying down ISP information, which is basically cable. So this company comes in, lays the cable, puts all the cable internet and so forth, and everybody is kind of like, if you want an ISP, you either use these guys, or what Janelle did is that she actually, because of ID, they hired AT&T to lay a specific ISDN line to this house, so that she could have a high-speed internet back to ID software. Because my wife is Janelle Jakeways. She's one of the people who worked on Quake 2, Quake 3, Quake 3 Arena. What was the other one? There was one other Quake game she worked on before she moved on. But the trouble was that then she had to leave this house, divorce. 2 years ago, we bought this house at a fire sale. It was just, that's another story in itself. But it happened to be that we got this house at a price that was unbelievably low. But of course, when we moved in, this house needed so many repairs. So it took a while to get this house fixed. But, now we live in a nice house in a very nice neighborhood that's still strangleholded by a single cable company, which is only using cable. And of course, when we first moved in, the first thing I asked is, give me some fiber. And they're going like, no. It says, please. And they said, no. And I said, how much? And they said, no. And I'm like, okay. So we had to deal with this 1 gigabit down, but the upload was like, whatever their mood was, but it was never higher than 50 megabits. Never. So, it was always the download was 20 times faster than the upload on the best of days. But sometimes the upload speed we measured with, what's it called? Let me get the name of the app here. It's a common one. Speed Test. Speed Test by, was it Ookla? But anyways, so Speed Test always came back. Downloads were anywhere between 600 megabits to up to 950, again, based on temperature, where the uploads was as low as, I'm not kidding, 1 megabit to as high as 50 megabits. And it was like, you know, what am I paying you guys for? So then, you know, up until about, 2 months ago when I was trying to do live streams, and the quality was so bad that I just got frustrated. And then when I call AT&T, because after all, they're going like, wait a minute, aren't you the house that the ID person worked at? And I go like, yes. Do you still work at ID? Maybe. No. But they go like, we could work something out. And then, of course, after talking to some technicians, and they said, okay, we did find a trunk that we could tap into, but it's way over here, so we're going to have to... And this is what they did. They had to drill a hole under the sidewalk, and the combined distance is almost a mile. And so they had to drill, make a junction box. Drill, make another junction box. Drill, make another junction box. And all the junction box really was, they had the cable, because when they're going to lay a cable, they're not going to lay a single fiber line. No. They lay a whole thick cable, so that therefore in the future, if other people in our neighborhood want to get fiber, there's a junction box right there. So technically, I just paid for our entire neighborhood and the next neighborhood to be able to get fiber if they chose to connect to AT&T and say, hey, AT&T, can I get some fiber? And it goes, there's a junction box just down, like 3 doors down. Sure, we can hook you up. But in my particular case, because I'm a preferred customer, they actually had to drill the cable under a major street. Then there's a junction box right where the entrance of our housing complex is. And then they drilled like about 5 houses down, which is where our house is. And there's a junction box right in my front yard. So, literally, I opened the front door, and there's a junction box sitting right there in our front yard. And then they had another crew come in, and by hand, they dug a ditch that was about a foot deep. And then from the junction box, they laid the cable down, and then they put a plastic cabling, like piping, and they actually put in a little... an outlet. Like, when you see a plug outlet, little cover outlet and so forth, and you can plug in your Ethernet in there. Well, they've got one which, there's a fiber internet line right there, in which they just plugged it in. And then that line, then there's another one that goes right into the little router right there. And they then set aside, here's some IPv6 addresses for you, here's an IPv4 address for you. We'll cash that check now. And so after they took out a gallon of blood out of me, fire me up. And then, of course, yesterday when I had to do the actual switchover, I then found that we use Eero, EERO, internet routers here for wireless, because I have a grid throughout the whole house, so it acts as one. So anywhere in the house, you got full 4-bar Wi-Fi. But it appears that those wireless repeating stations do not like it if you tell them to go from DHCP. For those who know ISP stuff like that, DHCP means something to you. Those of you, don't worry about it. But I had to change to a static IP. And their little iPhone app, the moment I told it to go to static IP, the iPhone app crashes. And I then had to yesterday call up Amazon saying, your stupid app crashes. How in the world am I going to change this? It ended up to the point where I ended up having to take all of my arrows offline, give them a complete factory reset, erase them completely, and then start from scratch, which unfortunately for me, I have all these machines with static IPs internally, all tied to their MAC addresses for security reasons, and I had to enter all of that in by hand. Oh, thank goodness I write this stuff down, because if I had put it in the arrows and forgot about them, I would have been so screwed. But that's why I made a post on Twitter yesterday saying if I have to enter another MAC address, so help me. Because I had something like about 40 machines, each with a unique MAC address that I had to lock in. Like there's a Xbox dev kit, there's a Switch dev kit, there's dev kits, and of course I got Mac servers, I got PC servers, I've got my Perforce server, I've got, I got wires coming out of here, each one of them going to a specific machine, and everything's all communicated, and build bots and stuff, and everything is ISP locked, because that way, if anybody tries to break in, it's going to say, oh, what's your MAC address? Oh, if it doesn't match, we don't even exist. We're not even going to acknowledge we exist. So therefore, it's kind of hard to pwn one of my machines. Not impossible, so please don't. Please don't. I beg of you, don't try to pwn my machines. But, it's all intentional because I'm a paranoid bitch. But nevertheless, after setting it all up, everything's all running all the tests, rebooting all the machines to make sure that every single one took their IP addresses properly, and verifying that they were all set, everything's working. Which, of course, then comes to the point where now the mice will play, the cat's away, the mice will play, and I'll go ahead and start doing my streaming. And here we are. So what went from a test to see if I'm actually at 1080p became me ranting about ISPs. Let me go ahead and see what the Peanut Gallery has to say. Tim Kelp writes, 5 digits with or without the decimal. I think I answered that one already, and the answer is no decimal. Corpus C writes, my first good connection was ISDN. The ping wasn't that much better, but oh, did it feel so much better. Yeah, I remember after leaving, while I was still at Interplay, I actually paid for a dedicated ISDN line. Now, of course, at the time, that was a glorious 128 kilobits. Because everybody else was using 56K baud modems, and I was streaming around on a dedicated line going at double the speed until later on I could afford a 256 kilobit ISD line to my house. Oh, I was styling. And of course, then when we formed Logicware, I ended up having to pay, I think, $500 a month for a dedicated T1 line, which at the time ran at 1.5 megabits. Right now you're laughing. So wait a minute, I pay $9.95 for 20 megabits. You were paying 500. Yeah, that's the way prices were. But hey, at Logicware, we were all styling. Everybody was like, oh my god, we can download our MP3s. Oh, can't say MP3s, otherwise the MPAA will come and get us. Then again, we ripped all our CDs off. Tin Kelp writes, that's an American telecom monopoly. Yes, it is. He's referring to the ISP, who will now remain nameless because I'm done with them. Which, of course, I had an addendum today because I was like, okay, it's not you, it's me. I found another one. My new lover is going to take care of me. She's taking care of me good. So we're breaking up. And they're like, but what if we give you 30% off? What if we give you a cell phone plan? What if we give... Like, no. And it took me an hour to finally get them to admit my system is shut off. I paid my final bill. Go away. First time chat. Forval. Fast.com is through Netflix. Must be referring to a speed tracker or something like that. 602 Workshop writes, LOL. Corpus C says, they should give you a percentage of any of the subscribers who use the line you paid to have put in. That would be nice. It would be very, very nice if my neighbors would help chip in. But that's not how things work. Besides, it's mine. T. Fever writes, the last mile. Yeah, that last mile, that 1 mile was not cheap. Thankfully, it's in the low 5 digits. Like, barely 5 digits, but still. Let's see here. I enjoy your streams, Becky. Finally caught one live. I am. But that'll be coming about 20, 30 years. Maybe 50 years, I hope, before you'll get the, hey, it's Burger Becky dead. But,
sorry, could you say that again?
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
My watch says, Burger Baking dead. Yeah, that's one thing about these Apple Watches. Even though I turned off Siri, it still tries to come on and annoy the hell out of me. Let's see here. Tiny Big Games right. Whoa, is that a Vectrex in the background? Yes, that is a Vectrex in the background. Let me move to the side. Yeah, that's a fully boxed Vectrex, fully functional, I made certain. And above it is a bunch of Vectrex games in boxes. I've been in the game industry for so long that most of this stuff up here, I actually bought it in the store brand new. And I've just been holding on to it ever since then. I mean, there's a couple of things in here I bought recently, like the 3DO Blaster was actually a recent acquisition. But like the Atari, the Code Warrior game, those joysticks and stuff, and the Dreamcast keyboard, yeah, they've been sitting in boxes for the past 20, 30, 40 years. And there's also a Mac 128 there, right there. No, is that a Mac 20? Oh, that's the SE. That's a Mac. I have a 120. I have like 2 or 3 128s in the garage. But that one's a fully restored SE. I actually fire that one up every now and then to play with it. Let's see here. Tiny Big Games goes, sweet. Yeah, I know. Tim Kelp, what if you fix the fucking problem, fucking telecards? Well, for one, sorry about saying the F word, granted. Just watch Deadpool. It'll anesthetize you to those kind of words. Forval, yes, I'm just replying to Tiny Big Games. Yeah, by the way, Tiny Big Games, love your name. T. Fever, already I'm forgotten. Let's see. First time chat from viewer. Smiles. 6002 Workshop. T1 lines. Those are the days. I used to run an ISP in the 1990s. Our upstream link to the internet backbone was a T1, which supported hundreds of phone lines and supported thousands of dial-up customers, all on a 1.5 megabit T1. Yeah, we could have been an ISP. I remember Logic where we used a company called TST On-Ramp. That was the name of it. We hired them. They went ahead and did their magic, connected the line to the back of our building, and then put it into our phone room, because we didn't really have a server room at that time. We did have a server, but it was in another room. But we then hooked it up to a couple of rack-mounted type Ethernet cables, and then the cables went to everybody's office, and we had individual offices for everybody, and we all worked on the we'll get all of our what's it called, we had everybody hooked up to these internet switches, but of course back then I think I was using 10 megabit switches. Because remember, this is 1995, and 10 megabit was like the stuff. Because I remember at Interplay we used a coaxial cable network between a whole bunch of machines, and the coaxial cable network only worked at like 1 megabit, and it only worked with one machine transmitting any one time, so it was constant packet loss. It wasn't until around 1995 when we finally started switching over to an Ethernet system. And I remember the manager was screaming and yelling because of how much money it costs to hook up everybody to Ethernet. But at least then the machines ran at 1 megabit. It was 10 base T. It was 10 base T Ethernet, and there was no more packet loss. But back then switches for 10 base T were costing about $1,000 in 1994 dollars. So that's really expensive. To put in perspective, this router right here I've got, it's called TP-Link, and it's a gigabit Ethernet, and it only costs like $89. You can just get it on Amazon.com, $89, and this is just power switches. This is the most expensive. It was an HDMI switch, because I use this thing to turn on dev kits. Like I say here, turn on switch 1 for the Xbox 360, then turn on these, the power for the monitor, power for the HDMI switch, press 1, turn on power 1, and then the dev kit goes live, and then all these lines go to all the different dev kits to allow me to turn on the debugger. That's what this whole thing setup is for. And I got a little sleeve here for the remote controls. One's for the HDMI switch, and the other one's the actual remote control for this TV. So, of course, sometimes what happens if I'm working and I want to listen to something, I just put this on Spotify, or I put on like a movie and just listen to the movie or series while I'm working here. So, home sweet home. You know, I got my office the way I like it. And TF River, oh, Tom, yeah, I know who you are. I guess I'll get my Retrobrite equipment back. Yes, you will, very soon. Let's see. Tiny Big Games writes Netgear. Yet, in 1995, when we bought the Switches, I don't think they were Netgear, but they were somebody else. But I don't remember if it was, what's the, either Cirrus Logic or who's the other big one that's still around today? I just know that it was a major player that made networking equipment, and it was like expensive. But when you're running an office with like 20 employees, and you got to have reliable equipment. 6502 Workshop writes, Coax networks, all fun and games until one machine's network card flakes out and brings down the whole network. Then find which one. Yeah, that was like working at Interplay in 1993 to 1994, because that was the time that we actually got a network. Because when we founded Interplay back in 1983, we were just individual computers, and when we wanted to transfer files, we literally took a floppy disk and gave it to other people. And then later on, we just archived stuff on CDs. In fact, that's one reason why I have stacks and stacks of CDs. I'm still going through my archives of CDs of stuff like this one here is Settlers 3. This one is Redneck Rampage, the Golden Master source code. Shadowing, the art backup. Still archiving these, because what I'm doing is slowly going through every one of those discs, backing them up on my drive array I have over here, so that I have actual retained backups. But that is how we archived the stuff back in the day. But around 93, yeah, it was around 90. First, it was around 93, because it was when Doom came out. Because see, it was 92 when it was Wolfenstein, but we were still on modems back then. But around 94, no, 93 was when we started getting a coax cable networking system. But then 94 came out, and then that's when Doom showed up. And then the network was trashed. And that was partially the reason why we had to switch from a coax network system to an Ethernet-based network system, because people were playing Doom so much that it was essentially killing the network for anybody to do anything else. Corpus C writes, the guys who reverse engineered Red Nukem would have really loved to have the Redneck Rampage codes. They could have just simply called me at any time. I have the whole thing. I mean, I have the Mac source, I have the PC source, I have the complete reverse engineered build engine code that we used, because even Interplay didn't have the source code. That's a story in of itself about how we did Redneck Rampage for the Mac. Thank you, source code licenses and not. Yeah, Corpus C, damn, LOL, yeah. I will have to give kudos to Nate Trost, because he was instrumental in helping out, doing a lot of the reverse engineering of the build engine, so we can convert it from Intel assembly into pseudocode, which is it looks like Intel assembly, but it's all written in C, so it compiles. And then I converted that into actual C code, which I actually had to analyze it, figure out what it actually did, and write pure C code so that it would do the functional the same, and then it would compile and run and test, and then that's what we used in the shipping product. But without the foundational work, it would have been so much harder. Corpus C, can you legally share it? There's a pretty good chance, but the only problem is that to make certain that, because let's see, the people who own it would probably be Activision, because I know that while Redneck Rampage's trademark is owned by Interplay, the code, assets, data, story is actually owned by Xatrix, which was owned by Activision. Now, Xatrix doesn't exist anymore, but it's all part of Activision. Blizzard, it says Blizzard bought the IP. No, Blizzard is Activision. So when Activision owns the IP, then Blizzard owns it by default. It's because Activision and Blizzard are one and the same. But as far as I know, no one's ever done anything with Redneck Rampage per se. And I know Interplay has been licensing out the old game to, I think, those collection CDs or collection things or other. I'd have to ask some questions around. But the thing though is, if anybody wanted to ask me questions like, "Oh, well, can you tell me what the source code says about this?" So, oh yeah, that's what the structure does. These are what the values are. This is it. That's fine. Tom Revor says it means it's owned by Microsoft now. Not until they consummate the deal. See, the thing though is that context. A few months ago, Activision and Microsoft announced that they were going to do a deal in which Microsoft was going to get a large mountain of money and buy Activision. They announced the intent, and they've signed a letter of intent. But they need to have their lawyers go through miles and piles of paperwork to actually understand what IP they actually own and what they don't. And then once they get this giant pile of paperwork, then they have to create a contract which states that, hey, we're going to give you this money in exchange. This is what we're going to give you, and that we have the legal right to give it to you. Then, because of the amount of money involved, it has to be the Federal Trade Commission, I believe it is. I could be wrong on specifics. But the government has to come in and verify that this does not violate trust laws. And the sad part is, because Activision and Microsoft are such large players, that they technically could create a monopoly by joining. So the government can actually come in when they're doing that phase of the contract and state, you're too big, you're done. We can't. In fact, that's kind of what happened with NVIDIA and ARM. NVIDIA made a deal to buy ARM, Advanced Risk Machines, and they ended up having to cancel the whole deal because government regulators came in and said, you're going to create a monopoly. And they put so many roadblocks that they ended up throwing the whole deal away. Same thing can happen with Activision. And of course, it's Activision Blizzard. It's all one. They're all one big happy family. Now, if they do get past the regulators, then and only then they can actually sign the contract. And of course, once the contract is signed, then money changes hands. Now, once that stage happens, the actual check writing and all the stock gets turned either into Microsoft stock, or everybody who owns Activision stock gets a check. That's up to whatever they decide. Those are things that they know that I do not know. Only then is it, okay, it's done. Microsoft owns Activision, and I have to talk to Activision. Because right now, if I wanted to do something with an Activision IP, I actually have to talk to Activision. Now, granted, their usual response today would be, everything's on hold until this is done. But something as like, hey, can I release the source code to Redneck Rampage? That's something like, okay, you're not actually buying Redneck, you're not actually licensing anything. Yeah, okay, we don't care. I mean, like when I released the source code to Doom for 3DO, Bethesda was actually kind of cool about that. They didn't say, like, Doom 3DO, we will never release anything on 3DO. Fine. But like when I tried to release the Wolfenstein 3DO source, at the time, Microsoft just bought them. And Microsoft's going like, we don't want any source released. It says, yeah, but it's for the 3DO. It's like, we don't want any source release because we're Microsoft. So what if the source code to Wolfenstein and dozens of platforms, including the 2GS, has already been released? So I still need to talk with somebody at legal, just basically saying, please, all I need is someone to tell me they promise they're not going to sue me if I release this source code. The odds are pretty good that I could just release it and not worry about it, but there's still that 5% chance that I could get a summons, and I don't want to spend money defending myself on something like this. And it's always been the problem with source code, IP, stuff like that. Anyways, I'm about ready to sign off because for me it already is past midnight, 12:20 in the morning in Texas time. But hopefully the that I am at 1080p, hopefully. Hopefully that I'm getting at a high frame rate. Hopefully you're hearing me fine, that there's no sounds or ambient noise or anything here. So therefore, once I start doing an actual regular podcast, it'll be an enjoyable experience for all. Tin Kelp writes, yeah, the stream was rock solid the whole time. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much, Tin. I am glad that the success is great. Products, you're welcome. Thanks for the stream. Yes, you're welcome. And I hope to hear from you soon. I'm planning on doing a stream on Sunday. So, Red Gomi writes, you're not in El Cerrito anymore? We moved here 2 years ago. Where have you been? We left El Cerrito when COVID hit, because I was working at Roblox. COVID hit, and we parted ways, and we were like, well, I can either still live in the Bay Area in a house I'm renting for an obscene amount of money, because, Bay Area, or we can move into a house we just bought in Texas for a song, and we own the house. So that was a no-brainer. It was an adventure going cross-country during the middle of the beginning of the COVID pandemic, but yeah, here we are. We're in a city called Heath, which is just outside of Dallas, and we're not that far from the id Cube building. The dark, the Next Cube building, because that's where Janelle used to work at. Then that's one reason why this house is near the id Cube building, because when it was built, she worked at id. So, anyways, thanks a lot, and take care, everybody out there, and